Good morning, class, and welcome to Introduction to World Religions. My name is Andrew Bridges. I'll be the instructor. This is simply a short video that will introduce you to the scope of the class, what we're going to be studying, and one method of studying called hermeneutics, which is the study of interpretation. I like to say it's the study of what words mean. So some of the major world religions we will be studying um, are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And those religions have their origin in the country of Israel for Judaism and Christianity, and then in Saudi Arabia for the religion of Islam. We'll also be studying the religions of Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, and the Sikh religion, and those have their origin in the country of India. And then we'll be looking at the religions of Confucianism and Taoism, and those both have their origin in the country of China. Other religions we will be looking at and learning about, but we won't devote an entire section to, will be Shinto, Zoroastrianism, Baha'i, and Yoruba religion. And we'll discuss those too. Um, so one thing to just note right away are the major world religions and their country of origin. For the first lesson, that'll be what you'll want to note. And the scope of the class will begin with the religions that have their origin in India, and again, proceeding chronologically, it would be Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism around the same time, and then much later the Sikh religion. And then we'll go to the religions that are often characterized as Abrahamic, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And one thing to note about that, having their origin in Israel for the first two, and then Saudi Arabia, particularly Mecca, for the latter, Islam, is that those religions share in their sacred scriptures, which is the Hebrew Bible or Torah, the New Testament, and then the Quran, they share the same individuals, right? So a good example would be Abraham, particularly because they're called the Abrahamic religions. Abraham will be referred to in the Hebrew Bible first, in the New Testament second, and then in the Quran third. So you'll get to hear about Abraham in all three of those sacred scriptures. And so many of the characters will be the same. Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism relate to each other in a similar way, where they share a variety of concepts. Some of the more notable ones, karma and dharma, um, but others, atma and atman, and then anatman for Buddhism, or jiva for Jainism. And then, in a similar way, Confucianism and Taoism are in conversation and share many of the same concepts and discuss them. And so this will be the first thing to note is a general organization, what the major world religions are, their countries of origin. Later we'll discuss the time frame in which they came into being and how they are in conversation with each other. And now globally, they all are in conversation with each other. Um, the next thing that we'll be looking at just briefly is sort of the notion of hermeneutics, or the study of interpretation, or what words mean. And for this, I like to use a non-religious analogy. When you're reading words in a sentence or paragraph, there is a certain context. And the first thing you want to do is make sure you grasp the context. And sometimes you can imagine it, you get a visual of what the word is. Other times it's more conceptual as opposed to sort of imaginary using of the senses. But either way, you want to be able to grasp the concept as the author of the text intended you to grasp the concept. And this will take some work, and this is one of, I think, the fascinating things about world religions is there's so many concepts and they're so varied and they're quite interesting. So let's just take the concept of spaceship, right? Let's say you're reading a text, like a newspaper or an article, uh, and you read the word spaceship. Now, that's going to have a certain context, and you're going to imagine a certain thing. Let's say you're reading and you read the word spaceship, and you then read the word NASA. You might imagine something, a spaceship that NASA has built and launched into space. But the word spaceship in a different context means something very different. If you're reading the word spaceship and you hear it in a movie review, and the next few words you read are Star Trek or Enterprise, you're going to imagine a very different type of spaceship than if you'd read the word NASA. And in a similar way, if you read the word spaceship and then you read the word Star Wars, it's going to cause you to imagine a very different type of spaceship. And the same thing with the word Independence Day and spaceship, again, a very different type. And so you can see that the word spaceship can have a variety of different meaning. In the mind, it brings up a variety of different images, different capabilities, and knowing how to interpret it and imagine that word in a variety of contexts is in a practical sense what hermeneutics is. Now, when we apply this to religion and the study of religion, the first thing to note is when you hear a general word, scripture, God, prayer, you may imagine a particular thing, or you may have a certain concept that comes into mind. And the concept, although it might seem general, it can also, in one sense, be particular. So when you hear the word prayer, you might imagine a certain ritual or style of prayer. And this might be applicable to one religion, to many religions. But if said in a different context, you may imagine something entirely different, which could also fall under the umbrella of prayer, the umbrella concept of prayer. And this can be for words like God. This can be for words like ritual or sacrifice is another good one. I've included in the Canvas site a PowerPoint on the variety of sacred scripture. And so when you imagine the word scripture, perhaps something visual pops into your mind. And this just gives a variety of scriptures. It talks about the Vedas, the epics, the Sri Guru Granth, the New Testament, the Quran, the Hebrew Bible, um, the Ifa divination. There's just a variety of sacred texts, and they have each a certain particularity. And one of the things I want to encourage you to do is go through that PowerPoint and just see the varieties of these scriptures. And so when you hear the word scripture again in a particular context, it may cause you to imagine a particular thing, right? And there's many varieties here. We might ask, is it authoritative? And if so, how much? What is its origin? Does it have anthropomorphic characteristic? What's its ideal medium, right? Is it meant to be oral? Is it meant to be chanted? Is it meant to be written down? Is it meant to be read aloud? Is it meant to be sung? Um, uh, does it have characteristics of a human being? Is it used in divination? So there's a variety of things, and when you now read the word scripture or writings or wisdom in the particular context, after looking at this, you should have more of a detailed imagination on what the word could mean in its particularity. Do you imagine a book? Do you imagine a scroll? Do you imagine a chant? Um, is the scripture preferred in a particular language? Is that not relevant? It's all going to depend on the context. And so we see a general word like scripture. And now when you read it in a particular context, as we'll continue to do throughout this class, you have a more detailed interpretation of what that word might mean. Um, and so this will be the first lesson, and we can do this with other concepts, which I encourage you to do, and we'll do throughout the class. We'll do this with ritual, we'll do this with symbol, we'll do this with prayer, we'll do this with sacrifice, and we'll do this with gods, with God, with soul, and with all these words that are general but can be particularized in a variety of contexts. So again, I'd like to welcome you to the class. I look forward to um, reading all that you write, and be sure to email me if you have any questions about the course or about any assignments. Take care.